Have you ever heard the saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell God your plans? Today's theme is, you may laugh when you hear God's plans. Thank you, Candace, for that dramatic reading of Sarah's laughter, because that's the theme of my sermon today. Today's scriptures, on first glance, last Sunday, when I started preparing, didn't hang together for me. I couldn't figure it out. When I prepare a sermon, I first read the scriptures, then I wait. And I pray that I hear God's voice or feel some inspiration. Then I research. I have a Bible commentary and a preaching commentary. And I have my absolute favorite source, which is the Jewish Annotated New Testament by Amy Jill Levine. And Amy Jill is a practicing Jewish scholar from Vanderbilt, but she teaches New Testament. She's so interesting. I would be happy to share any of my favorite resources with you. They are fantastic. None of them helped me much this week, though. What did jump out of the readings for today was Sarah laughed. We'll get back to Sarah later. This week was full of many emotions for me. Yesterday was my 6th ordination anniversary, and what would have been my 35th wedding anniversary. That's a lot going on. I've always been delighted that they fell on the same day. But since my husband's death, that has been very complicated for me. Episode 1, Complications of the Call to Ministry. The very first time I expressed my questions about going into ministry was to Father Barks. Look at the pictures down there. That's how long ago it was. And I think it was probably 1974. I was in college. When I had the nerve to tell him, he snickered a little bit and said, "Well, if you go to seminary, you will be the first woman from this parish to go." I'm not sure, but I think I am the first woman ordained from St. John's. I had a very positive experience at the discernment weekend at Seabury. But the brave 11 women in Philadelphia had not been ordained yet. And it was at least 2 years until women's ordination would be approved by the General Convention. The deacons were kind of sliding through, but I had no idea what a deacon was, and I'd never seen one. The wise men on my panel at the seminary said with a smile, "Well, Miss Hoff, we think you will have a good ministry, but you're a woman." And I remember blinking. In their words, those are their words, sorry, what it meant was no girls allowed. And I really wasn't too upset because I actually believed them at that point, no girls allowed. I found another path and became a music teacher. Life went on. It was a bad school bus accident decades later that sent me back for another discernment process. By the time I reached ordination 6 years ago, it was 43 years from beginning to end. A subtle laugh began that process from Father Barks. He'll be the first. Episode 2, Complications about Marriage. When I turned 30, a group of my friends gave me a surprise party and laughingly included gifts that would make up for the fact that I was sure I was never going to get married. I was the last of all my friends, and my brothers had begun calling me an old maid school teacher. In my mind, God had dropped the ball. I had prayed and hoped because I really wanted a family. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to have a family. It just wasn't going to happen. My prayers were not heard. Along came Bob, my husband. I would never in a million years have pictured marrying the man who laughed louder than any other human being and wore hush-puppy shoes on our first date. In fact, it was a year before I went out with him the second time. And when I called him back, he said, "Oh," in his voice, I was wondering when you would call. Bob was a true partner in my life and ministry. He had held on to me through the difficult days and the joyful ones, not to mention the challenges that we faced in our time together. We went through all the marriage vows, richer, poorer, sickness and health. We lost babies. We lost both of our parents. Each of us lost a sibling. He built his law practice and supplemented as a small business administration hearing officer for the city of Chicago, all while we were raising a son. I worked full-time at Roosevelt, I got my Master of Music degree. Bob was the rock for me and for our family, the best dad and son ever. Bob was a true partner in my ministry, encouraging me and standing with me in full partnership, getting people water, hanging up their coats. He was just wonderful. Now back to Sarah. She laughed when she overheard the conversation that Abraham had had with the visitors under the trees of Mamre. Sarah had long ago given up on the idea of ever having a baby. Family issues seemed insurmountable. And if you read ahead of today's reading, there are some really big moral issues surrounding her and her marriage to Abraham. A little shocking. She waited until she was an old woman, maybe supposedly 90 years old, and gave birth with Abraham. But this birth was to a whole new world of faith. It wasn't just one baby. Abraham and Sarah's offspring include all of us in the Judeo-Christian heritage. But she laughed, thinking this can't possibly be true. There's really something to be said for old age. In my two episodes of life, there's a lot of time between the yeah, right of the laugh and disbelief like Sarah's in the outcome of all the events. Being the old lady I am, I can see God working in my life in the events of my anniversaries this weekend. Perspective is a wonderful thing. It was so hard to see God's hand in the moment. But now I do see it. I see loving guidance and tender care and work of the Spirit all the way through my life. I'm telling you this to encourage you. Draw on this faith and let it sustain you as you live your lives that are put before you. If we think of life as a parade that we're in the parade. All the events of today and yesterday are what we can see. We can't see the future. We can't see too much of the past. But as this old lady, I can see the events now as if I'm in a helicopter. I see it all at once. I see the events, and what I see is amazing. I have had all that I needed, and I dare say most of what I wanted. Most of what I wanted for my life. I had it. I have it. My richness my life has been full of love and rich in blessings, not necessarily money, but blessings. My richness is in family. I married into an Irish Catholic family with somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 members in Chicago, one of the first Irish families in Chicago. My life with Bob was wonderful. Not always. It was rough the first 5 years, I'd have to admit. I've also had richness in my ministry. More difficulties than I'd ever want you to know about, because they were so difficult. It was so hard, and it was it took perseverance. It still does sometimes. But there are many, many people who have blessed me with their trust and loving support. And you're among them, of course. Now, and also in the past, you may not remember this, but as a parish, you put me through most of deacon school. Cookie walks were for my benefit sometimes, and I'm eternally grateful. Thank you for your faith. I have part of Jeremy's sermon from last week. We laugh. We don't believe it. But God blesses us, and no matter how frightening or daunting the events of our lives are, no matter how long it seems that we have to wait for God, love wins. Love always wins, and prayers are answered. We just sometimes don't have the faith and patience to wait for it. It's God's timing. Oh, God's timing isn't our timing. I hate that. I hate that about as much as I hate when God closes a door, he opens a window. I don't like that, but this one is true. God's timing is not our timing. And that's a tough thing to hear while you are waiting for a prayer to be answered. 43 years was a long time. So our scriptures today really do fall into place. I see it now. Sarah laughs. In the epistle, faith is the gift that gives us God's grace, in which that helps us to stand. And in the gospel, Jesus summons his disciples and us to spread his word. That makes perfect sense now. Sure didn't last Sunday. Life on this earth has a very mysterious quality. It's a quote from Frederick Buechner that I'll end with. Listen to your life. See it for the fathomless mystery it is. In the boredom and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and the gladness. Touch, taste, smell your way to the holy and the hidden of it. Because all moments are key moments, and life itself is grace.